Most men are so self-absorbed that they scarcely notice anything beyond their own concerns. Arthur Schopenhauer.
People think narcissism announces itself. They imagine vanity, posturing, someone loud enough to be obvious. That's convenient. It lets most people stop looking. The form of narcissism that actually causes damage doesn't look like confidence at all. It looks like sensitivity. It looks like someone who is aware, someone who notices tone, timing, reactions, someone who is always reading the room. Greene's point is uncomfortable because it removes the disguise. Narcissism is not about how much you love yourself. It's about how difficult it is for you to stop thinking about yourself. Most people carry themselves through the day with a low-level self-focus they never question. It's not dramatic, it's constant. Did that comment mean something? Why did they phrase it that way? Why hasn't that person responded yet? Why did the mood change? None of these questions are irrational on their own. The problem is how automatically they appear, and how rarely they are tested against reality. At birth, this makes sense. An infant has no distance from itself. Hunger, discomfort, desire, everything is personal because nothing else exists yet. Maturity is supposed to loosen that grip. Attention is supposed to move outward. For a lot of adults, it never really does. They learn how to function. They learn how to talk. They learn how to behave. But emotionally, they never stop orbiting themselves. This doesn't feel like selfishness from the inside. It feels like vigilance, like awareness, like being tuned in. In reality, it's noise. When attention is trapped inward, perception bends. Neutral events start carrying emotional weight they don't deserve. A delayed reply becomes a signal. A short answer becomes a judgment. A disagreement becomes a threat. Nothing overt happens, but everything feels charged. Here's the key problem Greene points to, and most people miss it. The narcissistic mind reacts before it observes. Meaning comes first. Facts come later, if at all. Once a situation is interpreted as personal, the body reacts. Tension rises. Defensiveness kicks in. The explanation is built afterward, calmly, logically, convincingly. By then, the conclusion already feels true. This is why narcissism is so hard to detect in yourself. From the inside, it doesn't feel distorted. It feels accurate. You're not imagining things. You're picking up on them. That's the story the mind tells. From the outside, it looks different. People feel talked over without being interrupted. Conversations keep circling back. Emotional weight shows up where it doesn't belong. Over time, others pull back, not out of malice, but exhaustion. The narcissistic person experiences this withdrawal as further evidence. Proof that they were right to be alert. Proof that something is off. The loop tightens. Greene contrasts this with something he calls deep narcissism, which sounds contradictory until you see it in action. Deep narcissism isn't confidence. It's absence of self-noise. These people don't scan constantly. They don't need to interpret every signal. Their sense of self doesn't require constant maintenance, so attention is available for other things. Other people, patterns, reality. They listen without preparing a response. They absorb criticism without flinching. They notice without personalizing. Not because they're better people, because their attention isn't clogged. This is the quiet difference that decides outcomes. The more inward your attention is pulled, the less clearly you see what's actually happening. Intelligence doesn't fix that. Good intentions don't fix that. Awareness slogans don't fix that. Only attention does, and most people don't realize where theirs is trapped. The reason narcissism is so difficult to recognize is not because it is subtle, but because it feels normal from the inside. Greene makes a sharp distinction here. Narcissism is not how you treat others. It is where your attention habitually goes. Most people assume they are objective observers of reality, who occasionally become emotional. In truth, for the shallow narcissist, emotion comes first and perception follows. The mind reacts, and only afterward explains why the reaction was justified. This is where the distortion begins. The narcissistic mind is constantly scanning for relevance. Conversations are filtered for implication. Silence is interpreted. Tone is dissected. Neutral events are evaluated for meaning. The question running quietly in the background is not what is happening, but what does this say about me? This question rarely reaches consciousness, which is why it feels reasonable. Greene identifies 3 mechanical features that keep shallow narcissism operating without resistance. The first is emotional centrality. Narcissistic individuals unconsciously place themselves at the center of events, even when they are not involved. If a meeting feels tense, they assume it is about them. If someone is distracted, they assume disapproval. If a plan changes, they assume exclusion. This is not arrogance, it is misattribution. Because attention is inward, coincidence feels intentional. The second feature is reactive interpretation. Instead of pausing to gather information, the narcissistic mind fills gaps immediately. Ambiguity is intolerable because it leaves the self unanchored. The mind resolves uncertainty by assigning meaning quickly, often negatively. This produces certainty without accuracy. Greene stresses that this is why narcissistic individuals feel so sure of their judgments. They are not guessing, they are relieving anxiety. The third feature is memory bias. Narcissism edits the past. Interactions that confirm self-importance or mistreatment are remembered vividly. Contradictory evidence fades. Over time, the individual builds a coherent narrative in which they are consistently misunderstood, undervalued, or wronged. This narrative feels earned because it is emotionally reinforced. Together, these mechanisms create a closed loop: reaction, interpretation, memory, identity. Once this loop stabilizes, it becomes very difficult to interrupt. Any challenge to the narrative feels like an attack on the self. This is why narcissistic individuals often appear defensive even when no accusation has been made. Greene points out a crucial consequence. Narcissism narrows reality. Because attention is consumed by self-monitoring, little remains for observing others accurately. Subtext is missed. Motives are oversimplified. Power dynamics are misunderstood. The individual reacts to an imagined version of events rather than the actual one. This is where relationships quietly degrade. People around the narcissist begin to feel unseen. Conversations circle back. Emotional labor increases. Small misunderstandings become exhausting. Eventually, others disengage, not out of hostility, but fatigue. The narcissist experiences this withdrawal as confirmation of their narrative. This is the tragedy of shallow narcissism. It produces the very isolation it fears, then uses that isolation as proof. Greene is careful not to moralize this. He treats narcissism as an attention disorder, not a character flaw. The problem is not selfishness. The problem is that inward attention crowds out perception. Deep narcissism breaks this loop by reversing the flow. When attention is directed outward, toward understanding others, reading environments, observing patterns. Emotional reactivity decreases. The self stabilizes because it is no longer constantly under evaluation. This is why deep narcissists often appear calm under pressure. They are not calmer by nature. They are less internally crowded. The key takeaway of this section is uncomfortable but precise. The more intensely you monitor yourself, the less accurately you understand the world. And the less accurately you understand the world, the more reactive and fragile you become. One of Greene's clearest demonstrations of narcissism operating without vanity or obvious ego is Napoleon Bonaparte during the later years of his rule. Napoleon is often described as arrogant, but Greene's point is sharper. Napoleon's downfall was not caused by arrogance, it was caused by narrowing perception. Early in his career, Napoleon displayed what Greene would call deep narcissism. His sense of self was strong enough that he did not need constant affirmation. This freed his attention. He studied terrain obsessively, read opponents accurately, and adjusted strategy based on real conditions rather than personal pride. His victories were not fueled by ego, they were fueled by clarity. As his power grew, something subtle changed. Napoleon began to assume that events revolved around his presence. His attention slowly turned inward, not toward vanity, but toward how others perceived him. He became increasingly sensitive to respect, loyalty, and recognition. Disagreement began to feel personal. Delay began to feel like defiance. This is the pivot point of shallow narcissism. By the time of the Russian campaign, Napoleon's strategic errors were not technical. They were perceptual. He interpreted resistance as provocation. He assumed hesitation signaled weakness. He believed his reputation alone would bend reality in his favor. Greene emphasizes that this was not foolishness. It was misplaced attention. Napoleon ignored logistics not because he was reckless, but because his internal narrative overpowered external signals. Reports that contradicted his expectations were dismissed or reinterpreted. Advisors who offered caution were perceived as lacking vision or loyalty. Reality did not disappear. It was filtered. This is the danger of narcissism at scale. Information that does not affirm the self is downgraded. Napoleon's emotional investment in being seen as decisive, unstoppable, and feared distorted his reading of both allies and enemies. He began to react to imagined slights rather than concrete conditions. His judgment grew rigid at the exact moment flexibility was required. The Russian campaign exposed this distortion brutally. Instead of adapting to the environment, Napoleon attempted to impose his will on it. He treated climate, distance, and attrition as inconveniences rather than structural limits. His attention was no longer on reality itself, but on how reality should respond to him. Greene notes a crucial pattern here. Narcissistic leaders do not lose intelligence, they lose curiosity. Napoleon stopped asking questions. He stopped observing deeply. He assumed understanding instead of testing it. His identity as a conquering force crowded out the humility required for accurate perception. What followed was inevitable. The army collapsed not only from cold and hunger, but from miscalculation rooted in self-reference. Napoleon interpreted every setback as temporary, every warning as exaggeration, every delay as something that would resolve itself through momentum. This is narcissism's most dangerous feature. It preserves confidence while eroding feedback. After the failure, Napoleon struggled to comprehend what had gone wrong. He blamed subordinates, weather, betrayal, external forces. This was not dishonesty. it was psychological consistency. To fully recognize the error would require stepping outside the self-centered framework that now governed his perception. Greene uses this case to make a hard point. Narcissism does not destroy power by making people foolish. It destroys power by making people misread reality while believing they see clearly. Napoleon's tragedy was not that he believed too much in himself. It was that he stopped seeing beyond himself. This is why narcissism is so dangerous in positions of influence. The individual feels decisive, centered, and justified precisely when they are becoming blind. And blindness, once established, does not announce itself. It feels like certainty. The most dangerous effect of narcissism isn't that it makes people difficult. It's that it makes them wrong in ways they can't detect. Once attention is habitually turned inward, reality stops arriving cleanly. It gets bent on entry. Events are no longer taken at face value. They are interpreted through relevance. What matters is not what happened, but what it implies. This is where judgment starts to rot. Narcissistic perception doesn't fail loudly. It fails quietly, through small repeated misreadings. A look is held too long. A tone feels flat. A response comes later than expected. None of these are facts. They are raw material. Meaning gets poured over them immediately. And once meaning is assigned, it hardens. Greene points out that narcissistic individuals are often convinced they are excellent readers of people. They trust their instincts deeply. That confidence is the trap. The instincts aren't sharpened. They're overactive. The mind is not observing. It's reacting. This creates a strange inversion. The narcissist feels perceptive precisely when they are least accurate. They confuse emotional intensity with insight. The stronger the reaction, the truer it feels. This is how small misunderstandings become permanent conclusions. Someone disagrees once. They are now difficult. Someone hesitates. They are now unsupportive. Someone pulls back slightly. They are now hostile. The narcissistic mind prefers coherence over accuracy. It would rather be wrong consistently than uncertain. And uncertainty is what outward attention requires. Greene emphasizes a consequence most people miss. Narcissism destroys proportionality. Minor events provoke major responses. Slight slights linger. Trivial setbacks feel personal. The emotional scale is off. The person reacts as if more is at stake than actually is. From the inside, this feels justified. From the outside, it feels exhausting. This is why narcissistic individuals often don't understand why relationships decay. Nothing dramatic happened. No betrayal. No argument. Just a slow accumulation of tension. Others begin to censor themselves. They choose their words carefully. They avoid topics. They disengage. The narcissist notices this. Of course they do, but misreads it. They assume avoidance confirms suspicion. They never consider that their own inward gravity is the cause. Here's where narcissism becomes self-sealing. Any feedback that challenges the self-centered interpretation feels invalid. Any attempt to explain is heard as dismissal. The person believes they are defending clarity, when in fact they are defending a distorted lens. Greene is ruthless on this point. Self-absorption makes people boring to reality. They stop learning. They stop adjusting. They stop noticing patterns that don't involve them. Intelligence stagnates because curiosity collapses. This is especially dangerous in positions of power. Leaders trapped in narcissism don't lack data. They lack receptivity. They interpret resistance as disloyalty, delay as defiance, criticism as threat. Over time, they surround themselves with people who affirm the narrative, not because of manipulation, but because everyone else leaves. The leader feels increasingly isolated and increasingly certain. That combination is fatal. But narcissism doesn't require power to do damage. In everyday life, it turns conversations into competitions for validation. It turns intimacy into emotional labor. It turns collaboration into quiet resentment. And the narcissistic person often believes they are the one doing the emotional work. Greene's synthesis here is not flattering. The more you interpret the world through yourself, the smaller your world becomes. Everything collapses inward. Perspective narrows. Surprise disappears. You stop being corrected by reality because you stop hearing it. Deep narcissism works in the opposite direction. When the self is stable, attention can afford to leave it. When attention leaves the self, perception sharpens. When perception sharpens, reaction slows. That pause between stimulus and meaning is where judgment lives. Without it, intelligence is wasted, experience is misused, relationships decay quietly, and the person causing it remains convinced they are simply being aware. That's the danger. Most people assume narcissism is corrected by insight. They believe that once you understand the problem, it loosens its grip. Greene is blunt about this. Insight alone does almost nothing. Narcissism is not a belief you abandon. It is an attention habit you interrupt. And habits don't break because they're explained. The first mistake people make is trying to reason their way out of self-absorption. They analyze their reactions endlessly. They replay conversations. They try to figure out what they felt. This often makes the problem worse. Self-analysis keeps attention exactly where narcissism wants it. Inside, the mind becomes busier, not clearer. The person feels productive while becoming more inwardly crowded. Greene's countermeasure is colder. Reduce internal commentary. Deep narcissists are not constantly checking themselves. They are not narrating every reaction. They are not monitoring how they come across in real time. Their attention is pointed outward by default. They notice what people do, not what it means about them. This is the first structural shift. Less interpretation, more observation. The second mistake is emotional explanation. When something feels off, shallow narcissists want immediate clarity. They ask questions too soon. They confront prematurely. They try to clear the air. Greene warns that this impulse is rarely about resolution. It is about relief from uncertainty. Deep narcissists tolerate ambiguity longer. They don't rush to label behavior. They wait for patterns. They let information accumulate. This patience protects perception. Many conflicts resolve themselves when not over-interpreted. The third mistake is taking feedback personally, even when it's subtle. Narcissistic individuals experience correction as a threat to identity. Even mild suggestions feel destabilizing. The reaction may be polite, but internally the person tightens. The mind starts defending. Deep narcissists do something counterintuitive. They depersonalize feedback before evaluating it. They don't ask, "How does this reflect on me?" They ask, "Is there something here I can use?" If the answer is no, they discard it without resentment. If the answer is yes, they adjust without self-attack. Either way, the self stays intact. The fourth mistake is emotional leakage. Shallow narcissists don't realize how much emotional weight they carry into interactions. Their reactions are subtle but persistent. Disappointment lingers. Irritation shows. Tension leaks. Others feel it and respond accordingly. Deep narcissists regulate expression deliberately. This is not repression, it's containment. They understand that emotion distorts environments. They choose when to express and when to withhold, not because they're afraid, but because they value clarity. The fifth mistake is confusing empathy with absorption. Narcissistic individuals often believe they are highly empathetic. In reality, they absorb emotions without processing them. They take on moods, slights, and tensions and make them personal. Deep narcissists maintain boundaries. They understand that not every emotion in a room belongs to them. Not every tension requires interpretation. This prevents contamination. They can be present without being consumed. Greene emphasizes something most people resist. Deep narcissism is built on self-sufficiency, not self-esteem. Self-esteem fluctuates. It demands upkeep. Self-sufficiency is quieter. It does not need constant confirmation. Because of this, attention remains available for reading reality instead of defending identity. This is why deeply narcissistic individuals often appear calm without being passive. They are not emotionally flat. They are selective. They don't respond to every signal. They don't internalize every reaction. They don't confuse noise for meaning. The final mistake is believing narcissism is eliminated permanently. It isn't. Greene is clear. Narcissism is a default human state. Under stress, fatigue, or threat, attention collapses inward again. The difference is not immunity, it's speed of recovery. Deep narcissists catch themselves faster. They notice when perception tightens. They widen it deliberately. This is the discipline, not self-love, not confidence, not positivity, attention control. And without it, intelligence erodes quietly, relationships thin out, and people become certain in exactly the places they are wrong. Narcissism doesn't ruin people's lives all at once. It narrows them. The damage is cumulative. It happens through thousands of small misjudgments that feel reasonable at the time. The person reacts, interprets, explains, moves on, and never realizes anything has been lost. What's lost is range. The narcissistic mind stops seeing alternatives. It stops imagining explanations that don't involve the self. It stops being surprised by reality. Everything starts to feel familiar, predictable, and heavy. This is why narcissism often masquerades as maturity. The person believes they've seen it all. They trust their instincts completely. They don't ask many questions anymore. They don't revise conclusions easily. They mistake certainty for wisdom. Greene's warning here is subtle, but brutal. When attention stays locked on the self, learning slows down. You don't notice new information because you're busy checking how things land. You don't adapt because you're busy defending a narrative. You don't correct course because correction feels like exposure. Over time, this produces a specific kind of stagnation. Relationships flatten. People stop bringing you complexity. They simplify themselves around you. Conversations become safer, shorter, thinner. You don't realize this is happening. You assume others have changed. Opportunities shrink the same way. You stop being invited into ambiguity. You stop being tested. You stop being trusted with nuance. Not because people dislike you, but because engaging you feels costly. From the inside, none of this feels dramatic. That's the danger. Narcissism doesn't feel like collapse. It feels like being misunderstood. It feels like being surrounded by people who don't get it, and that story feels convincing. Greene closes this law by turning the lens back on the reader, not to accuse, but to unsettle. If you are constantly explaining yourself internally, if you are always interpreting tone, if you feel emotionally implicated in most interactions, if feedback feels heavier than it should, if distance from others feels like a pattern, that's not bad luck. That's attention folded inward. Deep narcissism doesn't remove the self, it unburdens it. The self becomes solid enough to stop defending itself constantly. Attention loosens, perception widens, reactions slow. Reality starts coming through again. Not cleaner, not kinder, clearer. This is the final distinction of the law. People trapped in narcissism believe they are protecting themselves. In reality, they are protecting a distortion. And distortions don't just mislead. They quietly decide outcomes. You don't lose power because others overpower you. You lose it because you stop seeing accurately. And accuracy, once gone, is very hard to notice. That's the law.